All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special weekend edition of the Nomiki Show. We are doing a live interview with someone who I have just started learning about, and I regret not knowing about his work earlier. His name is Aleksandr Reid Ross, and he has done incredible work over the last several years around the rise of Neo-Fascism, how it's structured just a little bit differently than more traditional fascism. His work has spanned how fascism has risen across Europe historically, and how it loops into this new world that we live in today, where fascism is often linked to new media, essentially. His name is Aleksandr Reid Ross. He is the author. Excuse me, I am just getting signed out. I apologize, guys. Excuse me. Are we here? I got an alert that we are no longer live. Just want to make sure this is okay. I'm checking out the chat. It's just a one-woman show today, so hopefully we're good. Anyways, Aleksandr Reid Ross is the author of Against the Fascist Creep. It has been, people have praised this book. You can check it out anywhere. It came out, I believe, last year. Definitely check it out. It is worth looking at, especially right now as fascism is rising in this country, and it often overlaps with populist sectors of different political parties. So on that note, I welcome Aleksandr Reid Ross, who is joining us right now. Are you there?
Right here.
Ah, perfect. I was saying that, like, I'm a one-woman show today, and it's to you over text, and it just makes me so much more grateful to our team. Just while our chat is here, so you guys all know, we have like an amazing team. Dorsey, our producer, Ruthie, our booker, and the crew that's always, which is what I think you'll be interested in, always fighting off the trolls. We have great moderators and algorithm folks who jump in. So I just want to give everybody a shout out. And to our Twitch viewers, you're going to see this tomorrow. I don't know yet how to man the Twitch side of this. So with that, Aleksandr Reid Ross, I already did your introduction. Thanks for joining us this evening on this very important, we're 4 days away from the inauguration, 5 days away from the inauguration. And I think folks are really concerned about the state of our government, of just the political spectrum right now, where everybody stands, who's fighting with whom, what are these alliances. And I've been following your work for a bit. And I figured it was a good time to bring you in to dump your knowledge on our audience. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nomiki. I really appreciate it.
So let's first just talk about your book, because I entered the book at the top, and I'm just really curious, why did you publish the book? Was it in 2019? Why now?
Well, it was the book was published in 2017. It was actually kind of funny. I was approached based on some of the work that I was doing at the time, looking at eco-fascism, by a publisher, AK Press, who was interested in maybe a book about the subject. So, I was a little bit at that time, kind of nervous about that sort of thing. So I said, maybe there are some other people who have been writing about fascism for a long time, that a lot longer than I have. They might be better experts to talk to. And, AK was like, go ahead and ask them yourself, like if you think there are some people who would be better than you, then go ask them. And I confronted two people. I was like, you guys are really good, and you've been writing about this for a long time. Would you be interested in writing a book? And both of them were like, no, we really don't think fascism is that big of a deal at this point. It's not really on the rise. It's actually group numbers declining.
You published in 2017 after Trump, and when was this conversation? Pre-Trump or post-Trump?
The conversation was like late 2014 when I started writing it. So, well, I kind of got it going at that point, but no, I could understand where they were coming from for sure. I mean, I think that at that time it was really hard to foresee what ended up happening. You know, there were a very few number of people who were following the alt-right and watching as it was rising, you know. So, you know, it did kind of surprise me. I was like, I think it's, you know, I think it's going to be a really intense thing over the next several years. So I just said, okay, fine, I'll do it myself, because, you know, more research, you know, get better at knowing, you know, the situation. So I went for it.
So when you say the alt-right, I mean, I think folks in our audience in particular who live in who watch YouTube regularly and watch political YouTube are probably pretty familiar with the alt-right and the intellectual dark web, that, you know, like the Majority Report kind of community talks about a lot, and Sam has been, you know, battling these guys out at the Majority Report for a long time, and Michael Brooks, late Michael Brooks, wrote about in his book. Um, but at that time, I mean, was it called the alt-right? Was it clear that it was sort of fascistic? Like, what was how did you get that sense that early? It's easy to say it now. It's pretty clear now.
So the
Although
alt
Politico didn't get it. Let me just make that clear.
right.
Politico did not get that memo on Ben Shapiro.
Some people, you know, were a little late to the ball, but I think that, you know, the alt-right had been growing since 2008, 2009. You know, they were kind of like the youth front of the paleo-conservative movement for a little while. They were like patching together Ron Paul, some of these like kind of weird, I'd say right-wing, like anti-interventionists who masquerade as anti-imperialists. You know, so they were trying to fit everything that was anti-establishment and could be used for reactionary purposes together. And, you know, white nationalism obviously came to the fore. But it was really Gamergate, I think, that really hit it off. Like that really just kind of like got the ball rolling. And I think from Gamergate, you know, I would just talk to friends of mine and they'd be like, no, this is big. Like nobody, like people don't understand how bad this is, you know.
Can you remind people what Gamergate was?
Sure. I mean, there was some female journalists who were writing about misogyny in the gamer community, including developers and their fans, and they were just absolutely inundated with hatred, both online and, you know, offline. And this became a huge wedge issue for fascists to start waging these massive kind of troll wars and brigading different areas of the internet, including 4chan. This is part of the movement that ended up turning 4chan from like really offensive and terrible place to just like a complete neo-Nazi paradise. So Gamergate and misogyny were really kind of like the wedge issues, if you will, that got the alt-right really going.
Can I ask you a question that, I mean, maybe this was addressed then, but now it's a little bit more apparent in these like in the new platforms. How much of Gamergate was real? Like, were there like troll armies or fake accounts that are kind of boosting these messages? I'm not a gamer, but I'm aware of Gamergate, admittedly. And I'm sorry, guys. I know you're going to be really upset and unsubscribe now, but shocker, I'm not a gamer. Sorry, Twitch. I can play games. Just make that clear. My team is going to be yelling at me tomorrow. They're gonna be like, "Why did you say that?" But like, was it all real? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, so it is and it isn't, right? I mean, when you have very online communities, they often have lots of sock puppets. They have lots of artificial kind of networks and different techniques of brigading, so that you feel like the whole world is against you, you know. And there's all kinds. We're talking about misogynists here, so they're like real experts at gaslighting, you know, and like, you know, making you feel like you have set a really bad example for everybody. And you know, like I used to think that people like you were correct, but now that I look at what you're saying, like I've completely changed my mind and I've joined all your enemies. You know, like that kind
That
of
sounds so
tactic.
familiar. I feel like I've
Yeah,
heard that before.
yeah. So you know, they just were like really intense trolls. But I mean, the gamer community has a really intense fascist problem, right? I mean, I've talked to people who were early members of Atomwaffen division, which is like an accelerationist fascist group, was and they talk about how they used to organize through games. Like they would be playing games and, you know, using Nazi rhetoric and stuff, and sort of try to work their way toward people's hearts through games. They would organize on Steam and make use of all kinds of gamer platforms to really spread their ideas, Discord and stuff like that. I mean, you know, so you know, the thing about the gamer community, and I by no means want to like just disparage the whole gamer community at all. But the thing about that community is that it's very highly technologically developed, and so you do get a lot of like you know, encryption and savvy basically in developing online networks.
So why did it work? Like, I mean, I understand that the gamer community was, like you said, encryption and was more technologically savvy, but I think what's so strange is it's just I don't want to say it came out of nowhere, because obviously misogyny and white supremacy and you know, dare I say it, even like the Nazi community has risen, especially since Obama. Let's just say that, right? So why was that their first choice? Why did they say like, all right, this? I mean, it wasn't their first choice, but like, was this an experiment and it just kind of blew up?
Yeah, a lot of it is just, I like that you said blew up, because a lot of it is kind of like a suicide bomb. You know, it's very nihilistic, right? Like they'll adopt fascism because it's at that extreme, but a lot of them have switched over. Like Devin Arthurs, who co-founded Atomwaffen Division, was like a hardline communist in going into high school, and then he flipped just completely into being a hardline fascist, while kind of interfacing with games and stuff like that online. And I mean, you know, Devin Arthurs has a lot of issues, right? So he's not like a case study of every kid at America or whatever. But I don't know. Gamergate was in the episode. It was like an example or a model of this kind of suicide campaign where an effectively nihilist type of ethos, if you'll like allow me that term, is sort of packaged in fascism as like an edgy sort of young tendency, and then just like thrown into something, right, in order to, you know, in order to destroy it, to dismantle it, to creep everybody out and make them move away, you know. And they don't really care about their own future per se. They are kind of part of their cause, right? So yeah, I think this was just an example of a growing desperation on the far right and in the fascist movement, a growing nihilism, and just like an effort um, to sabotage the fabric of social life and political life in the United States.
And probably getting at kids, right? Like gamers are, I don't know if they still are, but they were overwhelmingly at the point,
Right.
young men who are, you know, if you want to radicalize anybody anywhere in the world, like there's your target. But what's been interesting to me is just to see how it's like spilled over. And I talk about this a lot on my show, and anybody who tunes in, who watches our show regularly, knows that on Fridays we have Fun Friday. We only have women on, people who identify as women, so all women. And I'm obviously a female host. It's political YouTube is extremely male. The viewers are extremely male. And obviously there are more men who host political shows, and they do very well depending on like how they host their shows, right? But one of the things that we're trying to crack, and it's not going to be easy, and some of it's just going to be by calling out tech companies who built their algorithms so that they monetize off of a type of rhetoric that works in conjunction with white men, but also some of this, the algorithms have been written by white men, and Google has, as we're sitting here on Google, they've been exposed for this recently. They're in a lawsuit with somebody who is hired to address the diversity, address the issue with the algorithm and the bias of the algorithm. And then as soon as she said, that's a very strange noise. Do you hear that?
No.
Oh goodness, I've never heard that before. I think it's coming through YouTube. Anyways, if you can't hear it, then we're good. But there's a bias, and so she addressed it, and she got fired. So there's a big lawsuit right now over this. But I think what's interesting to me is how it evolved from the gamer world into YouTube, and so these audiences, and granted, a lot of them have grown and have gone away from the Ben Shapiro's and moved into and away from the Jordan Petersons into the Sam Cedars, and that's amazing that he has that space to kind of be the gateway. And Sam Cedars' audience is a gateway into like women, but it takes so much work, and like, is that intentional for them to kind of like shift the targets? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, they have so many targets that, they can highlight any target at any time, depending on kind of the zeitgeist at the moment. So, when you think about fascists, there tends to be this kind of sense that, fascists are a very rigid, it's sort of like Mussolini's black shirts or Hitler's brown shirts. And, like we have this sort of set understanding of like what fascists are and what they do, but they can be actually a little bit more complex and adaptive than that, and so this is one example. Like Gamergate was an opportunity for them to insert into mainstream kind of discourse a totally misogynistic narrative that was sort of like veiled as, oh, this is just drama, this is just scene drama, or that kind of stuff, right? And so they'll insert their narratives wherever they can, give it, depending on what the discourse is about at any given time. So if it's about foreign policy, then they'll jump in there, and they'll try to, because they don't necessarily have a lot of platforms for themselves, they'll try to use what other people are saying, leftists or whomever, and try to manipulate that narrative into something that serves their ultimate sort of plan.
Agenda, yeah. Okay, so so it's okay. So let's talk a little bit about I guess what's happening right now. Right? We're living in this ecosystem right now where not only do you have Donald Trump, who I'll call a fascist. I don't know why people are debating this on the left still. I don't even know what purpose there is to debate it. He's obviously not. He's been impeached twice. He incited riots and an insurrection. But okay, so you have Donald Trump, who has made it safe for a lot of folks to come out and like discover their racism or whatever the world is, and also so many of these different 4chan, Q, etc. They've grown exponentially, and probably even Twitter. I'm gonna, dare I say it, like Twitter's grown, has monetized off of Trump and his followers, and Facebook, of course, we know those stories. So many of these tech companies, not to mention media companies, OAN and Newsmax and Trump and CBS, who notoriously said, they made more money than Trump is great for business. So Trump and his fascism and his hate are great for business, but what came with it was this rise of growth in his rhetoric, and obviously we saw what happened on the Capitol. So post-Trump, where do you see this all going? Because we'll get to the left's overlap in a second, but I'm curious, just from the perspective of the right and the right media and the right and the far right's platforming right now, where do you see this going?
Well, I think, judging by the momentum, it's going to be something like an insurgency. When the election started to heat up, right, in October, around then, I think that the far right made a pretty serious and significant choice, although it wasn't like an open like decision. Nobody asked them a question. They chose street action over electoral action, which is something that the left sometimes does. And in this case, the far right did it. And basically, if you look at the data, more protests were being held by the right than by the left, which is unusual in the United States, right? And so going into November, they had basically neglected the electoral strategy, and that's part of why they lost. And then we've seen the same thing happening and continuing, except that they've been turning against the state. They've been turning against, especially turning against democracy and the police. So they haven't always, been like democracy lovers or anything like that. They've just supported the fact that Trump was elected, and they used the electoral strategy quite effectively in 2016. But now those older tendencies of what people refer to as anti-government, but maybe should be better lodged as anti-democracy, those tendencies are coming back, right? And so they're increasingly sort of like this revolutionary, anti-democratic, nationalist movement. Most of them think that Biden stole the election, that the Democrats stole the election, and they are sort of posing themselves, like in Georgia, as disenfranchised from the system. So the more that they abandon the electoral approach, the more disenfranchised they'll become, and the more sort of explosive and volatile that movement will be. So, I think that it's not too crazy to think, the continuation of active protests against state capitals and that sort of thing will continue, along with bomb threats, hopefully not bombings, but bombings and assassination plots and all of those types of things. So we're not out of the woods.
I mean, what's so confusing to me is confusing in the sense that, like, beyond Trump, right? I understand many, if not most or all of these people idolize Trump and may not understand why he's doing certain things. But like the Georgia situation was just like, mwah, right? I mean, it was still very close in both of those Senate races. And yet you had what I think was 1 out of 4 registered Republicans said that they did not trust the elections and they were going to not, I don't know how many of them didn't vote. I don't know what the exit poll said, but that they weren't going to vote because they didn't trust the system. I mean, so it's not just that they're against the state, they're against the Republican Party as much as they are against the Democratic Party, and they see them the same. Yet, like, the outcome is not a good, it ain't looking good. Like, where is their pathway? If they don't have Trump, where is their pathway to continue to do any of these sort of insurrections? I mean, you're seeing state capitals shut down right now, militarized. I don't understand. Like, is it just going to be I mean, and some of these people are cops and ex-military, and they've got, some of them have bunkers in the middle of like Wyoming, hundreds of acres where they're just like storing guns, artillery. I mean, they're ready for these wars.
Yes. And well, they're moving in that direction, right? They're moving towards an aggressive, confrontational form of insurgency, really. Whereas, previously, I think that they had been a little bit more reserved, just sort of like defensive. They're more equipped to do more damage now. If you remember the occupation of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in January.
The standoff.
Yeah, in winter 2015. There was this call, I think it might have been from John Ritzheimer, that patriots all over the country should, take up arms and join the insurrection by occupying, federal property near them. And so everybody would come together at the same time, and there would be actually a kind of a viable, they would think, revolutionary movement. And so they've spent a lot of the Trump era building those forces, especially since the sort of galvanization of the Black Lives Matter movement last year, right after the police killing of George Floyd. So they have consolidated forces in different geographic regions, and they are less of a totally rural movement and more of like a rural suburban movement now. So they've gotten bigger. Their capacity is for combined action is bigger, and that's the direction they're going in. Yeah, I think that it is really kind of like a in a sense, maybe death spiral for the Republican Party, having brought Trump in and
Yeah.
allowed him to. But it was all started with the Tea Party, right? So, you know.
So you had to be blind on if you're watching our show. You maybe were sleeping for the last 3 months, but recent folks on the left, this isn't new, but it's just been amped up, and it's been a little bit more. There's been some clarity around it. There have been some leftists that have been claiming to be populist, that have. I won't go as far to say aligned. I think some of them absolutely have aligned, and some of them have not. They've danced with Republicans on in the populist, quote unquote, populist right. When I say Republicans, I don't mean the Republican Party. I mean Tucker. I mean, I've been on Tucker Carlson many times, admittedly. I know him, but I go on to argue with him. I don't go on to agree with him. I know this is a big point of debate today. Anybody who's been in the media space or in politics knows a lot of these folks because they go to events, you have to debate them, blah, blah, blah. So, there's this like whataboutism that's happening where it's like, well, what about that one time you met that person and you tweeted that person? It's like, well, we know each other from the world that we live in. It's another thing to echo each other's messages, specifically at a time when you have an insurrection, you have this president who's been impeached twice now, and there was an insurrection in which 5 people died, and some of the insurrectionists that went in there were wearing Auschwitz shirts and were chanting with Congress members outside of the Capitol, quoting Hitler. So my question is, where in this strategy, like why is some of the left kind of like dancing with this right, and they're dying on the hills of legitimate questions, right? Very real questions. Like censorship is obviously a very important question. It's a big picture question. Assange is obviously an ongoing issue, but like Nazis are invading our capitals around the country and organizing, and the economy is in a downward spiral. People are about to be evicted. Folks' medical debt is out of control, not to mention COVID is worse than it's ever been. We're upwards of 375,000 deaths in America right now. And yet we're having these like very academic conversations about problems that are root issues, right? Like censorship is an issue we have to deal with, but it's not going to happen in the next 2 days. And so I guess I'm really confused. Like, why are they echoing each other's messages? What's the game here? I know you've done a lot of research around this, so I'm just kind of like throwing it to you.
No, that's yeah. I think that a lot of this is just a consensus around the hatred of liberalism. I think that you find people on the left who have a tendency to look at the last, let's say, 50 years of U.S. politics as a unified thread, right? Of neoliberalism and neoconservatism, right? So when you look at things that myopically, you might just think that the actual enemy isn't, left or the right. It's the center. It's the neoliberal consensus. It's the neoconservative foreign policy. That is the universal evil, right? And I mean, I've been part of the left for a long time. I've been protesting, I've been opposing free trade agreements, that were bilateral free trade agreements that didn't have enough protections. They were toothless in terms of the environment and so on and so forth. I've been, a part of this movement, and I understand, right?
You don't have to explain it. I mean, this is important, like, I think, to our show, and just to reiterate it, I don't think these are left people.
Mm-hmm.
People on the left, unions, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I fought the neoliberals for like the last 5 years, and so much so that they've like written hit pieces on me and smear campaigns, and like, so it's not. I mean, I think all of us who've been in the activist space are very aware of like the threat of neoliberalism and how it's contributed to the exacerbation of income inequality and racism and environmental hazards. With that being said, I just want to clarify that for the audience. Like, you're progressive. It's not. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
But so if you have that sort of priority, right, that you oppose, the neoliberal neocon thing, as it were, then it's easier for you to say, all right, Ron Paul friends, and all right, like, Pat Buchanan and the American conservative scene, like, what we're going to do is we're going to oppose this stuff together. And you may not agree with me on everything, and I may not agree with you on everything, but we're going to link up here, and we are going to make some kind of, like, entente or something like that. And that's why you have a lot of people who looked at Donald Trump in 2015 and in 2016, and they were like, well, he may be the détente president. You may not like him, you may not agree with him on everything, but he'll be hands off, foreign policy, America first, anti-interventionism. I can stomach that more than I can stomach, Hillary. And so a lot of people bought into that. Of course, it was completely wrong, right? Look at Venezuela. Look at the bombings that he's done all over the world. But people will say,
destabilizing regions.
and people will say, oh, that's just because he has to, because the neocons in his administration have power. It's like, okay, now you're just sort of like trying to defend him. You're trying to defend, like, nobody did that with Obama. Nobody did that with, so Trump becomes this symbol of a potential to escape what feels like, a cyclical, just kind of non-changing reality for us. And a lot of that is based in a failure to perceive and understand the complexity that sort of exists within, hegemony and within like political society in the country. And yeah, so I think that's more like that's mostly what it is, and that's also why a lot of them are really kind of drawn to conspiracy theories, right? Because conspiracy theories give you that simple narrative, that simple arc, right? It's the globalists, right? Those are the ones that we have to resist, right? Donald Trump hates the globalists, and so do I, right? So conspiracy theorists give people like that linear interpretation of history that allows a clean break, right? So what we need is the clean break from this linear history. It's a Gordian knot, you have to, it's too complicated to actually try to work through and to mess with and to get involved and get your hands dirty. No, we just, we understand it all,
And it's also a great gateway for folks who are really insecure about like where their standing is in the world, are maybe frustrated. There's a lot of reasons to be frustrated right now. Donald Trump tapped into the white working class voter. We all know this story, right? Tapped in, instead of saying, it was oligarchs' fault. It was the fact that our tax structures are broken and that the rich, whatever. He blamed it on the Mexicans. Build the wall. It's the Mexicans' fault, et cetera, et cetera. And it opened up a racism that may or may not have existed in a group of people. And I think sometimes with these conspiracy theories, if there's an easy answer to something that you're angry about and you don't know, and it's kind of the candy that brings you in, suddenly you're listening to this conspiracy theory, and it might be something very simple like, Assange, right? I mean, that is, it's not simple, but you know, he's problematic, of course, but there are very reasonable progressive thinkers who side with Assange for many reasons.
Yeah.
But if you're listening to some folks who might peddle conspiracy theories, you'd come in with Assange and you come out, you know, quoting who knows whom. And so I think that's my concern about conspiracy theory, that the simplicity of it all is it's a great gateway drug. You know, you don't bring people in through reading your book, frankly. I appreciate it. So I do have a question. There's just like so many things I have questions about, but is there like other tactics that are used? I mean, you mentioned conspiracy theories right now, which I think a lot of folks are very aware of watching online. I'm looking at my Twitter feed like crazy and seeing how many conspiracy theories are out there, and also how many people are onto it. Thank you. But other than conspiracy theories, are there other things that tactics that are used to kind of pull in, maybe specifically an angry left that for the last 4 years, and I take part of this responsibility, has been taught to despise the neoliberals that have like ruined the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so you've got conspiracy theories. Those are pretty massive, especially because they have representation on both sides, right? So there's like a right wing and a left wing consensus that you often see around these different conspiracy theories. So that is really important. There's a lot of fringing that happens where you have people trying to sort of clamber for credibility, right? And so they will sort of try to grab somebody who's within their like ideological proximity, but has, you know, just a little bit higher of a sort of rank than they do, right? So you know, gaining posts, for example, like trying to gain access to the United Nations, right, through like sort of these sort of indirect avenues, right? So you've got like Russia convening a special session of the Security Council and then bringing in a conspiracy theorist to you know, give this kind of presentation and then posting that, and people will get attracted to it, right? People will say, oh wow, UN, he was in the UN, like wow, that's really important, you know. And then like, so similarly there are like awards, right? I think you've talked about this. There's like awards that certain groups will bestow on one another, right? So it's like, I'm an award-winning, you know, this or that.
Alex, I'd like to I want to make this official. Let's take a pause, commercial break, little. I now award you with the inaugural TNS Fascist Explorer Award.
Amazing.
We will send it to you in the mail. You are our first recipient.
Wow.
I am sorry it does not come with a financial reward, because the elements of journalism once told me that is not something that you should do. So
Yeah.
I apologize.
I just like to thank my mom. You know, my mom has always been there with me. She taught me everything.
All right, commercial break over. Continue.
Right. So these are different ways, and then there's like cross-platform sharing. I think that's another tactic where, you know, you'll get somebody from, let's say, Veterans Today, which is an anti-Semitic, you know, pseudo anti-imperialist group, and then they'll be sort of cross-posted to like Global Research, you know, which is this Canadian sort of conspiracy theory hub. And so you'll get like this sort of cross-referencing where people can just like spread out across a network. And so I think that that's another sort of tactic. And then of course, like there's just old-fashioned disinformation style. I mean, strategies and tactics like the stuff that people read about with the Internet Research Agency, right? There are countries around the world that are interested, invested, if you will, in promoting disinformation, and the way that disinformation draws together left and right, you know, makes it suitable for this kind of burgeoning scene that you're talking about, right?
So when you
And
say that, like, how is that structured for folks, who maybe, I think, and then maybe this is by design. I think a lot of leftist hosts in particular, we were so afraid of touching Russiagate, partly because Hillary Clinton uses the excuse for everything, and Rachel Maddow like went a little bit overboard, but also because there was a very intense anti-Russiagate movement on from some of these people that were now like, wait, were you ever on the left? And I know personally there are a lot of hosts who've been like, there is a space in between, right? Very,
yeah,
like the way that the impeachment went down, the way that the Russia investigation went down, it was structured against really a fair investigation, because the Republican was in charge of the committee, and yada yada yada. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there's been some incredible reporting about how not just Russia, other countries have been investing in like troll farms, and we have them here in the States now, and like I think that maybe some presidential campaigns use them against folks on the Democratic side for sure. So it's not like just Russia. It's like everybody's doing these tactics, and like I've experienced them from different places now, and I'm like, wait, I know what's going to come next because I've gone through this a couple times. But is that an example, like troll farms? Like what other kinds of things are used to misinform people?
yeah. I mean, so I think there are different structures, right? There's think tanks and lobby groups, right? And those are significant in terms of like injecting different narratives in different places. And then there's state television. So say Russia Today, for example, right? So they're state funded, and they will try to present a sort of a professional sort of veneer, and they'll invite some pretty wild people to spew conspiracy theories that would favor a Russian foreign policy position over one of kind of United States sort of liberal position. And like you, I find it important to kind of like distinguish myself as an observer from like a value judgment of like, well, we have to attack Russia or something. I'm not like fear mongering or anything like that. But I think that empirically, it's super important to recognize exactly what they're doing. They are supporting authoritarian conservatism, and they're using populism as a method of achieving those goals, often at the detriment of so many people.
And when you say they, I mean, like, let's just make it clear for everybody. This isn't like there's no McCarthyism here because we're not dealing with, this isn't Stalin, which if you're defending, find another network. This isn't communism. This is a petrostate and an oligarch backed presidency, right? Or whoever's behind this, or these are oligarchs funding this, or this is capital forces fighting the hegemony in this world right now. It's a battle between, frankly, major petrostates, right? Or I mean, I don't know if you call China a petrostate, but world powers that want to control the marketplace of different, whether it's petro or pipelines and other forms or natural resources. It's neocolonialism in a sense.
That definitely is important, but just like in the imperial like era in the 19th century, sometimes you have to get even more in the weeds and say, well, these different oligarchs have different sort of like entry points. They have different interests. You got Steve Bannon, who's funded by an anti-China guy. You've got Dugin, who's works at
Hang on. I want to delve into this. Can you tell us a little bit more about this part of it? Like who's Dugin? I don't know who any of these people are.
Right. Okay. So Aleksandr Dugin is a Russian fascist who started the so-called National Bolshevik Party, which is basically just National Socialism catered to Russia, right? And he
National Socialism, meaning
Nazism, yeah.
not
It's a tendency of the
DSA.
fascist movement, right? No, um,
Let's just be very clear here.
yeah, quite different. He
Quite different.
developed this kind of like geopolitical ideology, right? It's a political ideology that is based in spiritual claims to territorial claims, right? And so what he wants is basically a Eurasian empire from Dublin to Vladivostok, basically united in Kremlin as like the third Rome, which has been a trope for a long time. And basically political influence of Russia throughout the world, and especially over Eurasia, right? But he's also sort of moving a little bit more because he's working in China now, so he's moving a little bit more to promoting these kinds of like Belt and Road infrastructure projects, and also working with the regime in Iran, because as a traditionalist and a fascist, he effectively sees Iran as like the seat of like Aryan origins, which kind of transcend the so he's a pretty wacky guy. But funny enough, Bannon actually agrees with him on a number of these kinds of weird fascistic kind of geopolitical claims and spiritual claims. They know each other and have had long talks and stuff like that. So anyway,
And there's a lot of people, for folks to be aware of how this connects here is there are a lot of people who respect him that are representing themselves on the left right now.
oh sure, because effectively like Dugin has a lot of political influence in Russia. He's on the radio, he's on TV, he's in important think tanks. Some of his closest friends have been very close to Putin. He's actually also kind of supported by the Orthodox oligarch there who runs the Tsargrad TV station, and Konstantin Malafiev, who's actually very involved in their operations in Ukraine. And so, Dugin is an important figure on the world stage, unfortunately, and a lot of Russian allies correspond to effectively one of Dugin's favorite tropes, which is called the multipolar world. Effectively, this understanding of nations not as modern nation states, but as like sort of civilization states in a sense, like empires, effectively. That modern nations should effectively disintegrate into empire based in patriarchy. And so they sort of try to insert some kind of socialist discourse in there, but you hear multipolar world kind of stuff talked about in Iran, Venezuela, Russia's big allies. And that's kind of where a lot of the left starts getting that kind of rhetoric and that kind of understanding of what they think of as geopolitics.
Um, so looping this into like what's happening right now. I mean, what I've been very confused about is, okay, clearly Biden won. There's a lot of anger, even from the left, about Trump being deplatformed, even though leftists have been deplatformed left and right, demonetized, have a lot of, over the last several years. This isn't a new issue. And if your biggest concern is over Donald Trump, I'm very, like it's going to pave the path of what we've already been facing. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think what's really strange to me, and my theory on this is the reason why everyone's obsessed with censorship at this moment, rather than continuously dealing with how tech companies have too much power and breaking them up, or however you want to handle the issue. I think what's it just obviously to me seems like an outburst of anger, because the reality is this little strategy of consolidating a part of the left, maybe it's just a teeny little slice, with a right-wing populist alt-right movement that Steve Bannon himself was very much a part of building. It seems like they're really like throwing everything against the wall, because we live in these left spaces. We have a lot of our allies here. Like we know the ratings, we know what the numbers are. I've worked on the campaign side too. It's most people, despite what we see online with these troll armies and everything, is most people don't align. Most people are just Democrats or union members or working people. Most people don't live on Twitter and argue and even follow these conversations, even if their numbers are high. The reality is that most on the left don't watch them. And if they do, it's like they hate watch it, or maybe like a few of them do. So I don't really see what the goal is. Like, mathematically, it just doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere. Doesn't mean it's not dangerous, physically dangerous. Doesn't mean that it's not exhausting to just open up Twitter and see another conspiracy theory about you or your friends thrown out there. But it's just like, they're not going to break apart the Democratic Party, and they're not going to, the majority of the voters that voted for Bernie Sanders were Democrats. They identified as Democrats. Sure, he had a lot of independents too, but they weren't like independents that watch Tucker Carlson. So I don't understand how what coalition they're trying to build and what they're trying to do with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, thinking in terms of like, demographics of, different groups that form coalitions and so on. I'm not sure if they have really, a lot of that in order to develop a kind of third party or to develop a kind of real movement. I think a lot of it is social capital. Of course, I think we've seen that people can make a lot of money podcasting and stuff like that. So that's part of it. And I think another part of it is social capital. Because, like you brought up Twitter, Twitter has engaged so many people, right? And so you become invested in your brand on Twitter and stuff like that, right? Everybody does. And so there's like a groupism that starts to form, and people will follow the leader instead of the truth or the facts. And they will harshly attack people who aren't part of that brand. And when you have authoritarian that's how you get authoritarian movements, is this sort of entitlement that the leaders end up obtaining, right? So a lot of it just goes into a weird personality cultish type of celebrity, micro celebrity, if you will. And you can tell that a lot of the politics are insincere because they're not constructive. Like if you're a working person who wants to have change, you want to have change for really practical, serious reasons, and so you kind of approach things with a little bit more of like a practical understanding of how to bring about that change. Join your union, engage in praxis, but a lot of the sort of like social media heroes of the day, they're just sort of like the hero of our time or whatever, these kinds of Byron-esque, like quasi-romantic sort of shameless self-promoters, I guess. So I don't think there's a lot of seriousness in the politics. I think we've seen in the past though, with the 5-Star Movement that, you can actually build. The 5-Star Movement is an Italian syncretic party. They're like, they were founded by Beppe Grillo, the comedian, Italian comedian. And they actually had sort of founders that came from the Italian fascist party, the MSI, if I'm not mistaken. And they also had founders that came from the left. And so their whole idea was, we're creating this like post-fascist, maybe post-leftist sort of populist coalition that will bring people together against the establishment and sort of, bring about some change. And in fact, they won a pretty serious election, right? And the current president, Conte, prime minister, is part of the coalition that they helped broker. So they're a powerful party
But
now.
hasn't he
But
distanced himself from them too?
yes,
Because it's gotten like really.
they're part of the establishment now. They're part of the establishment now. So you've got like January 15th. There was this big movement called "I'm Opening," which is against COVID lockdowns, and they're aiming at this movement that was started almost as a joke, because that movement is now part of the power system, and they're perceiving them as the health dictatorship, right? And so you've
The
got
health. Oh my God, you must be healthy.
so you've got a populist movement in the street trying to
up.
overthrow this government that was supposed to be populist. And their first coalition fell apart too, because they joined with Lega, the League, far right party. After the League disgraced itself by some corrupt dealings with some Russians. And funny enough, the Dugin was kind of like not a key player, but he was like, in the orbit of that whole escapade. So,
but it worked in places like Mexico, right? AMLO, who has been he's the president of Mexico. He has traditionally been a leftist, right? That is sort of his coming up, and he went to war with PRI, I believe, for most of his time, and yet he had to build this right left coalition to come into power. And now he's facing extraordinary from his own part, this is a new party that he's had. This is the first time in I don't know how many 30 years, broken from the two-party system. Even then it was a one-party rule for many years. But AMLO, his own party members, the leftists, are now turning on him before he started to say, well, I don't know if Biden won the election. And if Trump needs somewhere to exile, Mexico is your what?
yeah.
What?
Wild. Just wild.
It's just absolutely wild to me. I mean, on one hand, he was so generous. I mean, it's I get he wants to have one hand in like in leftist politics, and Mexico's always been sort of this place where people can seek refuge, whether it's Lenin or Che and I mean, I don't know. I'm so confused by this, but there seem to be very similar. There's strategies where the left populace and the right populace unite in different countries, and obviously electoral systems are different, and the politics is different, and the moments are different. And I think the United States in particular is an extremely hard one to crack, for a million different reasons. But I mean, I don't see it playing out in any other way than just violence. And a rising violence group and a bunch of people monetizing this little like wave of whatever they're trying to create. There is a party that some are trying to, what's really curious to me is these aren't Marxists. Everyone's like, we're more left than you. And it's like, they're against ESA. They clearly have never read any Marx or Rosa Luxemburg. If they want to pretend to be some sort of like international foreign policy experts, they're not internationalists. They're just anti-American imperialists, plus nihilistic, plus wanting to make a lot of money on YouTube and podcasts or whatever. I don't know what this coalition is, but this next party that's rising up, I hear stories like the 5 Star Movement and some of the other, whether it's Zelensky in Ukraine, and I hear how Bannon has been a big part of it. It just smells like, oh, here's another one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is almost formulaic at this point, right? I mean, I think that it is a huge opening to a movement based on authoritarianism and conspiracy theories. And when you build something that has kind of a leader complex, right, or a leader cult, then you don't need really like an ideology or like a platform, like you can just, go by whatever that person says, and then, it's all gravy. So, I mean, it's really kind of like it's a recipe for sort of ambiguity and grifters, right? Grifters just grifting from the ambiguity. So
and meanwhile, they're trying to cancel anybody that's in their site, that's like blocking them or calling them out.
yeah, I think that's it's definitely an issue. I think that there's a tendency to target specific people, right? There's a tendency to go after them and to dogpile, right? And then just move on to the next person once you've like tried to destroy or successfully destroyed somebody's career or people's opinion of them, and you turn their own friends against them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and it's a pretty intense situation. People really kind of mobilize through social media to tear each other apart, right? And some are particularly pernicious, in activating that. But so it's important to, I think, to be sort of savvy about current events, right? And to not get thrown off by different kind of, networks or social media or websites, posing as good news sites and stuff like that. And to find sources of information that is trustworthy, right? I think that's probably one of the most important things right now, is to really stick with some trustworthy sources and to oppose disinformation and the grift.
And check your sources too. I mean, it's very easy to obviously fall for what's spicy, and I mean, from my perspective as a YouTuber, even if you don't like what they're saying, don't click on their YouTube. They get monetized for this stuff, so don't incentivize them in any way. I'm a big fan of ignoring them, but it only goes so far. Aleksandr Reid Ross, we are sharing your book up here. It's Against the Fascist Creep. Go check out his book. You can get it wherever they sell books, but where's the best place to buy? Where we have what's open right now at AK Press? Is that the best place?
Yeah, that's a really good place to get it.
Where do you get all your money from? That's the most important thing.
From AK Press. They send me millions of dollars, obviously funneled through Soros and all that. The National Endowment for Democracy, obviously.
Oh yeah, I get money from them too, I was told.
I get all my money from the choicest organizations. No, AK Press, obviously. So yeah, I'm a professor at Portland State and associate, or what do you call them? A fellow at Political Research Associates. They're really great. So,
awesome.
Good shout out to them.
Shout out. We hope to have you on again soon. Thank you for this incredible briefing. That's what I keep calling it, because every time I talk to you, I learn more and more, and I could spend hours on the phone with you just learning about what's really going on. I mean, my head spun the first time. We'll share some of your articles in the information section too, so people can read a little bit more. But when I read your piece about this specific alliance, my head spun around. It's swirled. And suddenly it all started making sense. So I really appreciate your work, your dedication to this. I know it can be dangerous at times, whether it's just emotionally dangerous or otherwise. So thank you for really putting yourself out there and contributing to the anti-fascist movement.
Oh, you too. So. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Aleksandr Reid Ross, go check him out. And in the meantime, I have to do a little bit of promotions for everybody. We don't have Dorsey, so I know I missed a few super chats. You're free to go, Alex. You don't have to stick around for this.
Thanks, everybody.
Normally we take people out, but I'm a one-woman show. I don't know how to do this stuff. If anybody knows anything about my knockerness. So we got some shout outs here. All right. And Kosin, thank you so much for the contribution, and for Alfred McCoy, In the Shadow of something. I have it written down, but I can't read my handwriting. It's my handwriting. Usually Dorsey has it like pasted in there. He's got like a whole system, but I will definitely check out Alfred McCoy. I really appreciate that. JL, thank you so much. And Cozen again gave us a shout out. Anybody else in the super chats that I missed, I apologize. We will get back to you. Make sure to click that sub button, guys. You have been so kind to us recently. We're really grateful for this community we're building, for I've gotten so many notes from folks, and if I haven't responded, I apologize, but they're we really have a very thoughtful community, and I just want to say from my heart, we're really grateful to you and for the love that you send us and the sweet notes that you send us and the contributions in terms of guest ideas or topic ideas. We are going to be doing more and more of this in the coming year. We have some news this week. When you meet us on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, when our show goes live, I will be giving you some interesting news. I have to be careful about teasing it out. But in the meantime, if you are not a TNS Book Club member, you definitely got to join. We are in the midst of 2 books, because the way that this goes is that you can sign up for 1 book a month, 2 books a month, or 4 books a month. And we started off with Thomas Paine and the Promise of America. Folks are in the midst of that right now. Send us your questions at the Nomiki Show at gmail.com with your name and like what part of the book you want to reference. We will be bringing those up with Harvey K., the author of Thomas Paine and the Promise of America. And we are doing an interview with some folks about the Plunket of Tammany Hall. The Plunket of Tammany Hall, it's really brief. Look at that. It's a small book, but it's a classic. And Tammany Hall, of course, was where machine politics really flexed its muscles in New York. I have done a lot of I love reading about Tammany Hall. So this is a great book. I'm glad that I'm picking it up, and I'm going to be reading it with you folks. But that is our second book. So if you are not a member of the book club, join now at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. And if you join at a special level, you also get a mug and you get a sticker. I'm trying to think what else. I think that's it. A mug and a sticker. It's a lot, actually. So definitely join our book club. You'll get the books, you'll get stickers and mugs, and you'll get great podcasts and conversations exclusive to the book club. I'm already loving it. We're learning as we're going. We're taking suggestions. It's a process, but we're really grateful to all of you for signing up, because I really did not expect to have so many book club members. And I'm like, got to make this work like fast. All right, everybody, have a wonderful Saturday night. Be well, be safe, and